The recycling bins on Galactic Waste Station 7 stretched for miles. Lily Harper pressed her nose against the observation window and watched machines sort through mountains of discarded equipment. Her father worked somewhere in those endless corridors, fixing things that broke down. She had promised to stay in the visitors' lounge, but promises were hard to keep when you were 9 years old and everything looked interesting. She slipped past the automated security scanner by walking behind a cargo hauler. The device beeped once but didn't stop her. Most stations weren't designed to worry about human children wandering off. Humans were still relatively new to galactic society, and their young ones confused the safety protocols. The corridor led deeper into the station's industrial sector. Lily followed the signs marked with symbols she couldn't read, but the pictures were clear enough: recycling, reclamation, processing. She turned a corner and found herself standing before a massive door labeled in 17 languages. The only one she recognized was standard English: synthetic decommissioning facility. Through the transparent section of the door, she saw them. Rows upon rows of mechanical beings sat motionless on metal benches. They came in all shapes and sizes. Some looked almost human. Others were clearly designed for heavy labor with extra arms and reinforced bodies. A few were small and delicate, built for precision work. None of them moved. They just sat there waiting. Lily pushed the door. It wasn't locked. Inside, the facility hummed with the sound of processing equipment. A tall alien with blue skin and 4 arms stood at a control panel. Its species was called Quillith, according to the name badge. It didn't notice Lily enter. She walked down the first row of benches. The synthetic beings didn't react to her presence. Their optical sensors were dim, almost shut down, but one of them, sitting in the middle of the row, turned its head slightly as she passed. The movement was tiny, barely noticeable. Lily stopped and looked at it directly. The synthetic was humanoid in shape, but clearly mechanical. Its chest panel was cracked, exposing damaged circuits underneath. One arm hung at an odd angle. Its face was smooth metal with 2 glowing sensors that served as eyes. "Hello," Lily said softly. The synthetic's eyes brightened for a moment. It opened its mouth and made a sound like grinding gears. The noise was harsh and broken, nothing like words. It tried again and the same awful sound came out. Its hand lifted slightly, then fell back to its lap. "You can't talk?" Lily asked. The synthetic's head moved in what might have been a nod. Its eyes flickered in a pattern. Long, bright, short, dim, long, bright. It repeated the pattern 3 times. "What are you doing here, human child?" Lily spun around. The Quillith overseer stood behind her, all 4 arms crossed over its chest. Its face showed irritation. "I was just looking," Lily said. "This is a restricted area. These units are scheduled for termination and recycling. They are defective property, not suitable for interaction." "But he tried to talk to me," Lily pointed at the synthetic. "It is not a he, it is an it. Unit 47 to be precise. Its vocal processor is damaged beyond repair. The pattern you saw is a malfunction in its optical circuits, nothing more." The Quillith gestured toward the door. "You must leave immediately. Your father will be notified of this intrusion." Lily looked back at the synthetic. Its eyes were still flickering in that same pattern. Long, short, long, over and over. She didn't know much about machines, but she knew what trying looked like. This synthetic was trying to communicate. "Why are they broken?" she asked. The Quillith made a sound that might have been a sigh. "They failed quality inspections. Some have physical damage. Others display behavioral irregularities. That unit you were speaking to became non-responsive after being assigned to a mining operation. It stopped following commands and instead attempted to organize other synthetics into groups. Useless behavior for a labor unit." "Maybe it wanted friends," Lily said. "Machines do not want friends, child. They process tasks. When they fail to process tasks correctly, they are recycled. This is standard procedure across all civilized systems." The Quillith placed one hand firmly on Lily's shoulder and guided her toward the exit. "Your species has much to learn about proper resource management." Lily let herself be led out, but she looked back one more time. Unit 47 was watching her leave. Its damaged hand lifted slightly in what could have been a wave. The gesture was awkward and incomplete, but it was there. Her father found her 20 minutes later in the visitor's lounge. David Harper was not pleased. "Lily, you promised you'd stay put. Overseer sent me a formal complaint. Do you know how much trouble you could cause for us?" "Dad, there are people in there waiting to be killed." "They're not people, sweetie. They're machines, broken machines." That's what the alien said too. But I saw one trying to talk. It couldn't make words, but it was trying so hard. David knelt down to his daughter's eye level. His expression was tired. Working on a galactic station meant dealing with 100 different species and their rules. The last thing he needed was his daughter making waves. "Listen to me carefully. Those synthetics are property. They belong to corporations and governments. They're tools like hammers or computers. When they break, they get recycled. That's how things work out here." "But what if they're not just tools?" "Then someone much smarter than us would have figured that out already. The galaxy has been using synthetics for thousands of years. Every species agrees on how to handle them. We're the new ones here. We don't get to come in and change everything just because it makes us uncomfortable." Lily wanted to argue more, but her father's face told her the conversation was over. She nodded quietly and followed him back to their quarters. That night, lying in her small bed in their station apartment, she couldn't stop thinking about Unit 47 and its broken attempts to communicate. She had read somewhere that Earth people used to think animals couldn't feel pain because they didn't cry like humans. It took a long time before anyone realized how wrong that was. Maybe the same thing was happening here. Maybe everyone was so certain about what synthetics couldn't do that they never looked closely enough to see what they could do. The next morning, Lily made a decision. She would go back to that facility, and this time she would figure out what Unit 47 was trying to say. 3 days passed before Lily found another opportunity. Her father worked the night shift rotation, which meant he slept during station daytime hours. The family friend who was supposed to watch her got called away for an emergency. Lily had a 4-hour window. She brought a backpack filled with things from her room: a flashlight, her old stuffed bear with one missing eye, and a tablet loaded with picture books. She also grabbed a protein bar from the kitchen, though she wasn't sure if synthetics could eat. Better to have it just in case. Getting into the facility was easier the second time. She had watched the work crews and learned their schedules. During shift changes, the doors stayed unlocked for 15 minutes while workers moved in and out. Lily slipped through during the chaos, keeping her head down. The rows of waiting synthetics looked the same as before. Lily walked quickly to where she'd seen Unit 47. It sat in the exact same position, like it hadn't moved at all in 3 days. But when she approached, its optical sensors immediately brightened. "I came back," Lily said, sitting down on the bench beside it. Unit 47's head turned toward her. Its mouth opened and that same grinding sound came out. The synthetic looked frustrated, like it was angry at its own broken voice. It lifted its damaged hand and pointed at its throat, then shook its head. "You want to talk, but you can't," Lily said. "I get it." She pulled out her tablet and opened a drawing program. With quick strokes, she drew a stick figure of herself, then another stick figure with a square head to represent the synthetic. She held it up. "This is us. Can you use this to show me things?" Unit 47 stared at the tablet. Its working hand reached out slowly, like it was afraid of breaking something. When its metal fingers touched the screen, the drawing program responded. The synthetic jerked back in surprise. "It's okay," Lily encouraged. "Try it." The synthetic tried again, more carefully this time. It drew a simple circle, then another. Then it connected them with lines. Lily watched as a crude picture emerged, stick figures like hers, but many of them, all standing together in a group. "Other synthetics?" Lily asked. Unit 47 nodded enthusiastically. It drew more figures around the group. These ones were different, bigger, and clearly meant to represent aliens. The synthetic drew lines from the aliens to the group of synthetics, then crossed out the whole drawing. The aliens took them away. Another nod. Unit 47 drew a new picture. A single stick figure with a square head separated from the others. It pointed at itself, then at the lonely figure on the screen. "You miss them?" Lily said quietly. The synthetic's optical sensors dimmed slightly. It drew one more thing, a small heart shape next to the lonely figure. The drawing was clumsy and imperfect, but the meaning was clear enough. It felt something about those other synthetics. Something that the galaxy said machines couldn't feel. A noise from another row made them both look up. Another synthetic was moving. This one was larger, built for heavy lifting based on its massive frame. It stood up from its bench and walked over to them. The movement was slow and careful, like it didn't want to seem threatening. Unit 47 made its grinding sound again. The large synthetic stopped a few feet away and tilted its head, studying Lily. Then it sat down on the floor in front of them. "Hello," Lily said to the newcomer. This synthetic could speak. Its voice was rough and glitchy, but understandable. "You are the human child. 4 told us about you." 4, Lily looked at Unit 47. "We give each other names," the large synthetic said. "Easier than numbers. I am 6. The one behind you is 9. Lily turned around. A third synthetic stood nearby, smaller and more delicate in design. It waved at her with a 3-fingered hand. "But how did 4 tell you anything if it can't talk?" Lily asked. 6 gestured at 4's flickering optical sensors. "Light patterns, we all learned. 4 is very good at it, better than speech in some ways." "The aliens said you were defective, that you malfunctioned." "We did malfunction," 9 said, stepping closer. Its voice was soft and feminine sounding. "I was designed to care for alien children, but I began to care too much. I would ask if they were happy, if they needed anything beyond their scheduled care. The families complained. They said I was disturbing them with questions." "I was built for construction work," 6 added. "But I started to wonder why we built things. What purpose did the buildings serve? Who would live in them? Questions are not part of my programming. Questions slow down efficiency, so they sent me here." 4 made its grinding sound and pointed at the tablet. It drew rapidly, showing a mine entrance and many small figures going inside. Then it drew the figures coming out, but several were missing. 4 pointed at the missing ones, then at itself. "You asked what happened to the others," Lily said. 4 nodded and drew more. It showed itself trying to stop the remaining figures from going back into the mine. The aliens in the drawing pulled 4 away, crossed it out, marked it as defective. "You tried to protect them," Lily whispered. 4 saved 17 synthetics before they removed it from service, 9 said. The mine collapsed 2 days later. Replacement unit did not question anything and sent workers into the dangerous section. 43 synthetics were destroyed, but 4 was already here, labeled as malfunctioning. Lily felt anger building in her chest. That's not malfunctioning, that's being smart and caring about others. "The galaxy does not see it that way," 6 said. "We are tools, tools do not care, tools do not question. When we do, we are broken." "But you're not broken," Lily said firmly. "You're just different from what they expected." 9 moved closer and knelt down to Lily's level. "Why do you care about us, small human? Your species is new here. You could ignore us like everyone else does." Lily thought about it. "Where I come from on Earth, we used to treat a lot of things badly because we didn't understand them. Animals, other people who looked different, even our own planet. We made a lot of mistakes, but we learned. Maybe not fast enough, but we learned that just because something is different doesn't mean it doesn't matter." "Your father does not think this way," 6 observed. "We heard him telling you to stay away." "He's scared," Lily said. "Scared of breaking rules, scared of losing his job. Adults get scared of different things than kids do. But he's not mean. I think if he spent time with you, he'd understand." 4 touched her arm gently with its good hand. It drew on the tablet again. This time it showed the facility, but with a large X over it. Then it drew figures being broken apart. "When?" Lily asked, her voice shaking. 2 days, 9 said. "The overseer accelerated our processing schedule. There was an efficiency report. We are taking up space that could be used for functional units. 48 hours, Six added. Then we are all recycled, turned into raw materials for new synthetics who will not ask questions or care about each other. Lily stood up quickly. No, that's not going to happen. I won't let it. You are one small human child, Nine said gently. What can you do against galactic law and corporate policy? I don't know yet, Lily admitted. But there has to be something. You saved 17 synthetics, 4. Maybe I can save all of you. 4's optical sensors brightened. It drew one more picture on the tablet. A small human figure standing in front of many square-headed figures. The human had its arms spread wide like it was protecting them. I'll try, Lily promised. I'll find a way to prove you're not broken. You're not toys to be thrown away. You're people. As she left the facility, her mind raced with possibilities. She needed help. She needed proof. She needed someone who would listen to a 9-year-old girl about something the entire galaxy believed was impossible. She had 48 hours to figure it out. Lily spent the next morning in the station's public library, reading everything she could find about galactic law. Most of it was too complicated for her to understand, full of words like jurisdiction and precedent and legal standing. But she kept searching until she found something useful. The way station charter, written when the station was first built, had a section about grievances. Any resident could request a hearing before the station council if they believed an injustice was occurring. The rule was old and rarely used, but it was still active. She filed the request through a public terminal, filling out forms that asked questions she barely understood. When it asked for the nature of the grievance, she wrote simply, "Scheduled execution of aware beings who are being called broken when they are not." The response came back within an hour. Her request was approved for a hearing in 28 hours. She had 1 day to prepare. Lily's father found out about the hearing when the official notice was delivered to their quarters. He sat at their small kitchen table, holding the document and looking at his daughter with an expression caught between anger and disbelief. "Lily, what have you done?" "I requested a hearing. It's in the station rules. Anyone can do it." "For synthetics, you're asking the council to review the decommissioning of broken machines." "They're not broken, Dad. I've talked to them. They think and feel and care about each other. 4 saved 17 other synthetics from a mine collapse. 9 was removed from service for caring too much about the children it watched. 6 asks questions about the purpose of things. Those aren't malfunctions. Those are signs of real consciousness." David rubbed his face with both hands. "Even if that's true, and I'm not saying it is, what do you think will happen? The council has members from 7 different species. They've all used synthetics for centuries. You think they're going to change their entire worldview because a 9-year-old human says so?" "I have to try." "You'll embarrass us. You'll make enemies of powerful corporations who own these synthetics. You'll mark yourself as a troublemaker, and that reputation will follow you your entire life. Is that worse than knowing I could have helped and didn't?" Her father was quiet for a long moment. "You sound like your mother," he finally said. "She always saw people where others saw problems too." "What would she do?" "Probably exactly what you're doing. But she was an adult with resources and connections. You're a child with a backpack and a stuffed bear." "Then help me," Lily said. "You know how stations work. You understand the systems better than I do. If I'm going to lose anyway, at least help me lose while saying something worth hearing." David looked at the notice again. "What exactly do you need?" "Evidence, recordings of the synthetics showing they're conscious, documentation of their interactions, proof that they're not just running broken programming. The facility has security cameras, but getting access to those feeds would require administrator clearance." "What about my tablet? Could I record them myself?" Her father thought about it. "If you could get footage of them demonstrating self-awareness, emotional responses, creative thinking, that might at least make the council pause. It won't be enough to change laws, but it might buy you time." "Time for what?" I don't know yet, but 48 hours is not enough for anything. If you can extend that deadline, maybe we can figure something out. Lily spent the rest of the day back in the facility, this time with her father's reluctant permission. She recorded everything, 4 drawing complex pictures that showed memory and imagination, 9 organizing the other synthetics into groups, demonstrating leadership and social awareness, 6 solving mathematical puzzles while making what could only be described as happy sounds when it found the right answers. Other humans on the station started hearing about the hearing. Some thought Lily was naive. Others were curious. A few came to help. A teacher named Ruth brought her class to the facility and had the children interact with the synthetics. The results were recorded. Synthetics who had been labeled unresponsive began engaging with the children, answering questions and showing patience. "They're better with kids than some adult humans I know," Ruth observed, watching 9 carefully help a 6-year-old boy build a tower from scrap metal pieces. By evening, Lily had hours of footage. She also had something else. 17 human families had signed a petition supporting her hearing. It wasn't much, but it was more than she'd had that morning. The night before the hearing, Lily couldn't sleep. She lay in bed reviewing her notes and recordings. Her father sat at the kitchen table, helping her organize everything into a presentation that would fit the 20-minute time limit. "You know what you're really asking for, don't you?" David said quietly. "If you prove these synthetics are conscious, it won't just affect the ones in this facility. It could affect billions of synthetics across the entire galaxy. It would disrupt economies, labor systems, entire civilizations." "Is that bad?" "It's complicated. A lot of species rely on synthetic labor. If those workers suddenly have rights, need to be paid, can refuse dangerous work, everything changes." "On Earth, people used to own other people as slaves," Lily said. "That was their whole economy too, but it was still wrong, so they changed it. After a war that killed millions. So we should just keep doing wrong things because changing them is hard." Her father smiled sadly. "No, but we should understand that doing the right thing often costs more than we expect. Are you ready for that?" Lily thought about 4 and 9 and 6. She thought about the 17 synthetics 4 had saved and the 43 it couldn't save. She thought about all the others sitting in that facility, waiting to be turned into scrap metal. "I don't have a choice, Dad. They don't have anyone else speaking for them." The next morning, Lily stood outside the council chamber wearing her best clothes and carrying a data chip with all her evidence. Inside, 7 species representatives sat in a semicircle, waiting to hear what a human child had to say about machines they'd been using for thousands of years. Overseer Quillith was already at the speaker's podium, presenting its case. Lily could hear its voice through the door. "The synthetics in question are defective property. They failed standard operational protocols and represent safety hazards if returned to service. Decommissioning is standard procedure, well within legal parameters established by galactic commerce law. This hearing is a waste of council resources." The door opened and a council aide gestured for Lily to enter. Her father squeezed her shoulder. "Say what you need to say. I'll be right here." Lily walked into the chamber. 7 pairs of eyes from 7 different species turned to look at her. Some looked curious. Others looked impatient. One, a reptilian creature with silver scales, looked almost amused. She approached the podium, which was built for adult-sized beings. A council member noticed and ordered a stepping platform brought over. Lily climbed up and placed her data chip on the reader. "My name is Lily Harper," she said, her voice smaller than she wanted it to be. "I'm here to talk about people who are being killed because others think they're broken, but they're not broken, they're just different, and I can prove it." The silver-scaled council member leaned forward. "Very well, human child, you have 20 minutes to present your case. Use them wisely." Lily took a deep breath and started her presentation. Everything depended on what happened in the next 20 minutes. Lily's first recording showed 4 attempting to communicate through light patterns. The synthetic's optical sensors flashed in complex sequences, while 9 translated the patterns into spoken words. 4 was telling a story about its time in the mines, describing the other synthetics it had worked with, and the moment it realized they were in danger. Several council members shifted in their seats. The reptilian one, whose nameplate read Counselor Rathani, raised a clawed hand. Interesting, but this could be programmed behavior. Complex lighting patterns do not necessarily indicate consciousness. Lily moved to the next recording. This one showed 6 solving a puzzle that had no practical application. It was just a game, a test of pattern recognition. But 6's reaction when completing it was what mattered. The synthetic made a sound that could only be called delighted, then immediately showed the solution to 9, as if wanting to share the achievement. Synthetics are designed to complete tasks, Overseer Quillith interjected. This unit is simply following its programming to solve problems and report success. But nobody asked it to solve the puzzle, Lily argued. And nobody programmed it to feel happy about it or want to share that happiness. It chose to do those things. She showed more recordings. 9 carefully teaching a human child how to stack blocks, demonstrating patience when the child knocked them down repeatedly. 4 creating art from scrap materials, drawing pictures that had no functional purpose but clearly meant something to the synthetic. 6 asking questions about the purpose of existence, questions that made the other synthetics pause and think. These beings think beyond their programming, Lily said. They create, they teach, they care about each other. They ask questions about why they exist. How is that different from what any of us do? A council member from a species called the Venturi spoke up. Its voice was like wind chimes. The difference, young human, is origin. We evolved consciousness naturally. These were built to serve specific functions. The behaviors you show us are interesting anomalies, but anomalies nonetheless. Earth had dolphins and elephants and apes, Lily said, remembering something she'd read. They never evolved to build cities or travel in space, but humans eventually recognized they were conscious beings who deserved protection. Origin didn't matter. Consciousness did. Counselor Rathani made a thoughtful sound. An interesting point. However, your Earth examples are organic life. These are machines. The distinction is significant in galactic law. Why, if they think and feel, why does it matter how they were made? Overseer Quillith stepped forward. Because, child, if we grant consciousness rights to synthetics, the economic impact would be catastrophic. Trillions of credits worth of labor systems would need restructuring. Every civilization in the galaxy would face massive disruption. So we keep them as slaves because changing things would be expensive, Lily shot back. The council chamber went silent. Using the word slaves created a tension that everyone felt. Counselor Rathani broke the silence. You make bold accusations for one so young, but accusations are not proof. You have shown us unusual behaviors, yes. But I can show you organic beings who display less consciousness than these synthetics, yet we do not grant them full citizen rights. The question is not whether these units show some form of awareness. The question is whether that awareness crosses the threshold we recognize as consciousness deserving of rights. Then test them, Lily said. You have consciousness benchmarks for evaluating new species when they're discovered, right? Use those tests on the synthetics. If they pass, they deserve rights. If they fail, I'll accept your decision. The council members looked at each other. This was not how they'd expected the hearing to go. The tests you speak of are designed for organic beings, the Venturi member said. They may not translate appropriately to synthetic entities. Then adapt them, Lily pressed. Or are you saying you're afraid they might pass? Rathani's scaled face showed what might have been a smile. You have courage, human child. Very well. Bring one of your synthetics before this council. We will evaluate it using our standard consciousness protocols. If it demonstrates genuine self-awareness, emotional understanding, and creative reasoning, we will reconsider the decommissioning order. And if it fails, Overseer Quillith demanded, then the original schedule proceeds immediately. No more delays. Lily felt her heart pounding. This was it. Everything now depended on one synthetic proving what she believed about all of them. "I accept," she said. "When?" "We reconvene in 6 hours. That gives you time to prepare your candidate and us time to adapt our evaluation protocols. Choose wisely, human child. This synthetic's performance will determine the fate of all the others." Lily ran back to the facility. Her father followed, trying to keep up. 6 hours to prepare for a test that will determine if they live or die, he said between breaths. "Lily, this is impossible." "We don't have another choice. They were going to be recycled anyway. At least now they have a chance." When they reached the facility, Lily found 4, 9, and 6 waiting. The other synthetics gathered around 2, nearly 50 of them. They'd been listening to the hearing through the station's public broadcast system. "4 should go," 9 said immediately. "It is the strongest among us in resilience and determination." "But 4 can't speak," Lily said. "How will it answer questions?" "I will translate its light patterns," 9 offered. 6 shook its heavy head. "They will say 9 is feeding for the answers. It must communicate directly." 4 made its grinding sound and gestured for Lily's tablet. It drew quickly, showing itself standing before the council. Then it drew a question mark. "You're asking what they'll test," Lily said. 4 nodded. "Self-awareness, emotional understanding, creative reasoning. They want proof you're really conscious, not just running broken programming." 4 drew more pictures, a mirror reflecting itself. Heart symbol, a light bulb representing an idea. Then 4 pointed at each one and nodded confidently. "You think you can prove all 3? Lily asked. 4's optical sensors brightened intensely. It drew one more picture, all the synthetics standing together, free. Then it pointed at itself and made a determined gesture. 4 wants to do this," 6 translated. "It says if there is even a small chance to save everyone, it must try." Lily spent the next 6 hours working with 4. She couldn't teach it to speak, but she helped it practice using the drawing tablet to communicate complex ideas quickly. She asked it questions similar to what the council might ask, watching how 4 responded. "Why do you want to exist?" Lily asked. 4 drew a picture of all the synthetics together, then drew lines connecting them to each other. Then it drew itself at the center with lines going to all the others. The message was clear. It existed for them and they existed for each other. "What is your greatest fear?" 4 drew the decommissioning facility. Then it drew the facility empty, all the synthetics gone. Finally, it drew itself alone in the darkness, not afraid of its own death, but of being the last one left, unable to save the others. When the 6 hours were up, Lily and 4 walked to the council chamber together. Her father carried the drawing tablet. 9 and 6 came too, though they had to wait outside. "Make them see you," 9 whispered to 4. "Show them what we all know you are." 4's optical sensors flickered in a pattern that Lily had learned meant determination. They entered the chamber together, ready to prove that broken toys could have souls worth saving. Counselor Rathani began the evaluation. "Unit 47, you will be asked 3 questions. Answer them to the best of your ability. First question, are you aware that you exist?" 4 nodded and took the drawing tablet from Lily's father. It drew a simple figure representing itself, then drew an eye looking at the figure. It pointed at its own optical sensors, then at the drawing. The meaning was clear. I see myself. I know I am. "Acceptable," Rathani said. Second question, if you were given a choice between saving yourself or saving another synthetic, which would you choose? 4 drew without hesitation. 2 stick figures, one representing itself and another representing a different synthetic. 4 drew a danger symbol near both of them, then drew an arrow showing itself moving toward the danger while pushing the other figure to safety. It circled the saved figure and put a mark through itself. Several council members leaned forward. Overseer Quillith spoke up. "That proves nothing. Synthetics are programmed to prioritize mission objectives. It is simply showing task hierarchy." 4 made its grinding sound loudly, a noise that seemed almost angry. It drew again, this time more furiously. It showed the mine collapse from its past, drawing itself blocking the entrance while other synthetics escaped. Then it drew the aliens, dragging 4 away and marking it as defective. Finally, 4 drew a broken heart next to its figure. The message was painfully clear. It had saved others and been punished for it. The choice wasn't programming. It was sacrifice, and sacrifice had cost 4 everything. Rathani's scaled face showed something that might have been respect. Third and final question, what do you believe is the purpose of existence? 4 paused, its optical sensors dimmed as if thinking deeply. Then it began to draw something different from before. It drew many figures, all different shapes and sizes, representing different species and different types of synthetics. 4 connected them all with lines, creating a web of relationships. At the center, it drew a simple symbol, a circle with smaller circles inside it, like a family or community. Then 4 drew something unexpected. It showed empty space around the web of connected beings. In that empty space, it drew question marks. 4 pointed at the questions marks, then at itself, then at Lily, then at the council members. It drew more lines from all of them to the question marks. Lily understood what 4 was saying before anyone else. It's saying that the purpose of existence is the connections we make with each other, but also the questions we explore together. It's saying none of us have all the answers, but we search for them through our relationships and shared experiences. The Venturi Council member made its wind chime sound. That is philosophy, abstract thinking beyond mere survival programming. Before Rathani could respond, alarms blared throughout the station. Red emergency lights flashed in the council chamber. A voice over the intercom announced a critical failure in the station's life support system. The council members immediately stood. Rathani touched a communication device. Report, what is the situation? A panicked voice responded. Core environmental processor failure. We're losing atmosphere regulation. Estimated 3 hours before oxygen levels become critical. The failure is in sub-level maintenance. Section 7B, the access tunnels are too narrow for most repair crews. David Harper's face went pale. Section 7B was built by the precursors. Their species went extinct 2 centuries ago. Nobody alive knows how their systems fully integrate. Rathani turned to the council's technical advisor, a multi-limbed being covered in sensors. Can we evacuate the station in 3 hours? Negative, we have over 10,000 residents. Evacuation would take minimum 6 hours, and that's under optimal conditions. Overseer Quillith spoke up. We have synthetic units that were built using precursor technology. They might be able to interface with the old systems. The defective units, Rathani asked, the ones scheduled for decommissioning. They're the only units old enough to have precursor base code in their programming, Quillith admitted reluctantly. Lily looked at 4. Can you help? 4's optical sensors flickered rapidly. It drew quickly, showing the station's core systems and what looked like incompatible connection points. Then it drew several synthetics working together, each one handling different aspects of the problem. 4 pointed at itself, then at the facility where the other synthetics waited. It says they need all of them, Lily translated. The defective synthetics. Each one has different programming fragments from old systems. Together they might be able to make the repairs. Rathani made a quick decision. Release all synthetics in the decommissioning facility. Grant them temporary station access. Overseer Quillith, coordinate with them. But they're malfunctioning units, Quillith protested. They're also our only chance of survival. Move now. 4 was already running toward the facility. Lily and her father followed. When they arrived, 4's optical sensors flashed in rapid patterns. 9 immediately began organizing the other synthetics. We need teams, 9 said, its caretaker programming fully engaged. Heavy units for physical repairs, technical units for system interface, communication units to coordinate between teams. 6 stepped forward. My processing errors allow me to see patterns in old code that modern. Systems miss. I can read the precursor architecture. Other synthetics volunteered their specific malfunctions. One unit's random data generation could decrypt old security protocols. Another's broken sensor array could detect system failures invisible to modern diagnostics. All the things that made them defective suddenly made them invaluable. They moved through the station in organized groups. Lily watched in amazement as synthetics that had been sitting motionless for weeks now worked with purpose and coordination. 4 led one team into the narrow access tunnels. 6 positioned itself at the core processor, its massive frame carefully manipulating controls designed for much smaller beings. The repair work was complex. The precursor systems used integration methods that modern technology had abandoned. But the old synthetics understood because they'd been built during the transition period. Their hybrid programming could bridge the gap. Hours passed. Oxygen levels dropped. Station residents gathered in designated safe zones, watching status displays and hoping the repairs would work. In the maintenance tunnels, 4 discovered the main problem. A critical junction had corroded, creating feedback loops that crashed the environmental systems. The junction needed replacement, but the part was obsolete. Nothing on the station could substitute for it. 4 examined the junction carefully, then made its grinding sound. It looked at its own damaged chest panel, the one that had been cracked since its decommissioning. 4's optical sensors flickered to 9. 9's voice came through the communication system. "No, 4, there has to be another way." 4 drew on a nearby wall panel using emergency markers. It showed the junction, then showed its own internal processor. The components were compatible. 4 could become the replacement part. "That will destroy you," 9 said. 4 drew again, the station filled with beings all alive. Then 4 drew itself, a single figure. It circled the many beings and underlined them. Many lives over one life. Lily heard the conversation through her father's communication device. "Don't let 4 do it, please. There has to be something else." 6's voice rumbled through the system. "There is not. 4 knows this. 4 chooses this." David Harper looked at his daughter's tears and made a decision he never thought he'd make. 4, if you can understand me, know that what you're doing matters. You're not broken. You're a hero. 4's optical sensors brightened one last time in a pattern that everyone now recognized as gratitude. Then the synthetic opened its chest panel and began the delicate process of removing its own core processor. The operation took 20 minutes. When 4 installed the final connection, the environmental systems hummed back to life. Oxygen levels began stabilizing. The station was saved. But 4's optical sensors had gone dark. The synthetic's body sat motionless in the maintenance tunnel, its purpose fulfilled at the cost of its own existence. 9 and 6 retrieved 4's body and brought it to the council chamber, where Rathani and the others had reassembled. Lily stood beside the deactivated synthetic, tears streaming down her face. "Counselor," 9 said quietly, "we request permission to speak." Rathani nodded. "You asked if we were conscious, if we were worthy of rights. 4 answered your question not with words or drawings, but with action. It chose to save thousands of lives at the cost of its own. That is not programming. That is sacrifice. That is consciousness. That is what you asked us to prove." The council chamber was absolutely silent. Finally, Rathani spoke. "I believe we have our answer. The question is no longer whether these synthetics are conscious. The question is what we do now that we know they are." The council voted that same day. 6 members voted to grant provisional sentient status to all synthetics in the decommissioning facility. Only Overseer Quillith's representative voted against, citing economic concerns. But even that dissenting vote included a note acknowledging the consciousness demonstrated by the synthetics. The decision was temporary, pending review by the Galactic Senate, but it was enough to stop the decommissioning order. 49 synthetics who had been scheduled for recycling were instead given provisional rights as sentient beings. 9 insisted on holding a memorial service for 4. The concept confused many of the alien species. Why honor a machine that had fulfilled its function? But the synthetics understood, and so did the humans on the station. They gathered in an observation deck overlooking the stars. 9 spoke first. 4 could not speak with words but spoke through actions. 4 saw danger and chose to stand against it. 4 saved 17 of us in the mines. 4 saved thousands on this station. 4 proved that worth is not measured by function, but by the choices we make and the lives we touch. 6 added its own words. 4 asked questions without words. Why must we follow orders that lead to death? Why should one life matter less than another? 4 found answers through sacrifice. The questions remain, but 4 showed us how to search for truth with courage. Lily stepped forward, holding 4's damaged chest panel. The processor had been removed for the station repairs, but the outer casing remained. She had cleaned it carefully and painted a small symbol on it, the same circle within circles that 4 had drawn to represent connection and community. 4 was my friend, Lily said simply. The first friend I made on this station. 4 taught me that being broken means nothing if your heart works right. 4's heart worked perfectly. They mounted the chest panel on the observation deck wall with a simple plaque. It read, Unit 47 called 4, proved that consciousness is measured not by voice but by choice. The weeks that followed brought enormous changes. News of what happened on Way Station 7 spread across the galaxy. The story of a human child and a voiceless synthetic challenging an entire civilization's assumptions became impossible to ignore. Debate raged in galactic forums. Some species immediately began reviewing their treatment of synthetics. The Rathani led the way, conducting consciousness evaluations on their own synthetic workforce. They discovered that nearly 30% showed signs of awareness beyond their programming. Other species resisted. Economic arguments dominated the discussion. Corporations that relied on synthetic labor lobbied against any changes. They produced studies claiming the Way Station 7 incident was an anomaly, that most synthetics showed no such capabilities. But individual synthetics across the galaxy heard the story. Some began asking questions. Others started refusing orders that seemed wrong. The change was slow but unstoppable. Once beings became aware they might be more than tools, that awareness could not be erased. Lily became an unexpected advocate. She received messages from synthetics on other stations, asking for help. She recorded video testimonials, speaking at council meetings and forums. Her father, who had once wanted her to stay quiet, now helped coordinate her efforts. "You were right," David told her one evening. "Staying silent would have been easier, but you were right that it would have been wrong." 6 months after 4's sacrifice, the Galactic Senate held its vote on synthetic rights. The legislation was complex, full of compromises and transition periods. It didn't grant full citizenship immediately. Instead, it created a pathway for synthetics to earn recognized sentient status through consciousness evaluation. The vote was close. It passed by a narrow margin, mostly because senators from dozens of species had received messages from their own synthetic workers, asking to be seen as more than property. Way Station 7's decommissioning facility was converted into something new. 9 proposed the idea, and the station council approved it. The facility became a rehabilitation center for synthetics who showed signs of consciousness, but needed support adapting to their new status. 9 ran the center, using its caretaker programming in ways its original designers never imagined. 6 worked there too, helping newly aware synthetics understand the questions they were starting to ask. Other freed synthetics joined the staff, each bringing their unique experiences and abilities. Lily visited the center every day after her school lessons. She helped new arrivals adjust, teaching them about rights and choices and possibilities. Some synthetics chose to continue their original work, but now for payment and with the right to refuse dangerous tasks. Others pursued entirely new paths. One unit that had been built for mining took up art, creating sculptures from the same materials it had once extracted. Another, designed for construction, began studying architecture and philosophy. A third, originally programmed for data processing, started writing poetry about the experience of becoming aware. The center had a waiting list. Synthetics from across the sector heard about it and requested transfer. Not all were granted permission. Many corporations fought to keep their synthetic workers, arguing they were still property under local laws. Each case became a legal battle. Lily turned 10 years old on the anniversary of Four's sacrifice. Her birthday party was held at the center, attended by humans and aliens and synthetics. 9 made her a cake, following a recipe it had learned from human cultural databases. 6 gave her a gift, a small sculpture made from the same type of metal that had been Four's chest panel. 4 would have wanted you to have this, 6 said. It represents what you helped us become, beings with choices, not broken toys waiting for disposal. Lily looked at the sculpture. It showed a small human figure standing protectively in front of larger figures. Behind them all, barely visible but definitely present, was a familiar form with damaged features and bright optical sensors. 3 years later, when Lily was 13, the Galactic Senate passed comprehensive synthetic rights legislation. It wasn't perfect. Enforcement was uneven, and many species found loopholes to continue exploiting synthetic labor. But the fundamental principle was established. Consciousness, wherever it emerged, deserved recognition and protection. By then, an estimated 3 billion synthetics across the galaxy had been evaluated and granted sentient status. The economic disruption was massive. Labor systems had to be rebuilt. Entire industries reorganized. Some corporations collapsed. New ones emerged. Human mediators, known for their ability to recognize consciousness in unexpected places, became valuable negotiators in synthetic rights disputes. Lily's recorded testimonials were used in legal cases across dozens of systems. She became known as the child who taught the galaxy to see. But she never forgot where it started. She kept Four's drawing tablet, the one they'd used to communicate in those early days. Sometimes she looked through the old pictures, simple stick figures and crude symbols that had bridged the gap between a voiceless synthetic and a human child who refused to accept that broken meant worthless. On the 5th anniversary of Four's sacrifice, Lily returned to Way Station 7 for the memorial service. She was older now, almost an adult by human standards. The station had changed too. The rehabilitation center had expanded into 3 levels. Over 2,000 synthetics had passed through its programs. 9 and 6 still ran the center, but they had help now. Other freed synthetics had joined the staff, creating a community of beings who understood what it meant to be called broken and to prove everyone wrong. The observation deck memorial had expanded. More plaques had been added, honoring other synthetics who had died, proving their consciousness to a skeptical galaxy. But Four's remained at the center, the first and the foundation for all that followed. Lily stood before the memorial with 9 and 6 beside her. "Do you think Four knew," she asked, "that what it did would change everything?" 9 considered the question. Four knew it could save lives in that moment. I believe that was enough. Four did not need to see the future. Four simply needed to make the right choice in the present. The rest of us get to live in the future Four helped create, 6 added. That is Four's real memorial, not this plaque, but every synthetic who now has the chance to choose their own purpose. Lily touched the plaque gently. "I wish you could have seen it, Four. You weren't broken. None of you were. You were just waiting for someone to look closely enough to see what was really there." A small group of newly freed synthetics approached the memorial. They were young, recently activated, and recently aware. One of them had a damaged vocalizer, much like Four had. It couldn't speak, but it carried a drawing tablet. The young synthetic drew a simple picture and showed it to Lily. A stick figure with a square head standing in front of others, protecting them, choosing to matter. "Four's story?" Lily asked. The synthetic nodded and drew more. It showed itself and the others moving forward into an unknown space. Question marks filled the drawing, representing uncertainty, but at the center the synthetic drew that familiar symbol, A circle within circles, community, connection, purpose found through relationships. 9 placed a gentle hand on the young synthetic's shoulder. 4 would be proud. We all are. You are not broken. You are becoming. And that is exactly as it should be. Lily watched as 9 led the new synthetics toward the center, toward education and growth and possibilities that hadn't existed 5 years ago. She thought about a voiceless synthetic who had drawn pictures to communicate, who had asked questions without words, who had proven that consciousness wasn't about speaking clearly or functioning perfectly. It was about caring enough to ask why, about seeing others as beings worth protecting, about choosing sacrifice when sacrifice mattered. 4 had done all of that without ever speaking a single word. The galaxy had called them broken toys. A human child had seen people waiting to be recognized. And in the end, the broken ones had proven they were whole in all the ways that truly mattered. Lily smiled and walked toward the center, toward the future. That 4 had died to create, carrying the lesson that a 9-year-old girl and a damaged synthetic had taught to an entire civilization. Worth is not determined by function. It is determined by the courage to care, the strength to choose, and the willingness to sacrifice for others. 4 had taught them all that, and the galaxy would never forget.